Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. This is Rowan Goodrich here with the South Carolina Department on Aging, and I'm going to be going over our new menu requirements that will be taking place in July 1st. So just to give you a heads up, this information will be available on the Department on Aging website. You can follow this link, and if you go to reports and plans and then to our Aging Network Policy Manual, you will find the minimum meal specifications in Appendix 500A, and that is where you will find these actual requirements that I'm going to be going over today. Now, they're not in there as of yet. They are not live yet. The whole manual is actually under revision. It's annual revision. So hopefully soon we can get that out. Otherwise, I would say reach out to your area agency on aging for a copy. But just to give you an idea of when these changes should occur, it definitely should be implemented by July 1st of 2021. And of course, if you have actual specific questions today after the session is over that are related to your unique operations, feel free to reach out to me. That way we can have some one-on-one conversations. So the Older Americans Act is where these nutritional standards are actually derived from. If you look in the Act under Section 339, it actually reads that meals should provide 1/3 of the DRI and also be compliant with the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans. So just a little review, what are the DRIs? Well, those are the requirements or the limits on nutrients. So for example, for vitamin C, the requirement would be at least 90 milligrams of vitamin C per day. Or for a limit, you may see no more than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. And the DRIs are used for planning and assessing diets for healthy people. Now, the dietary guidelines is another tool that we use for developing our menu guidelines. And the dietary guidelines provide science-based advice on what to eat and drink for promoting health and reducing risk of chronic disease. And what the dietary guidelines does is it actually translates the DRIs into the food and beverage recommendations. So for example, in the DRIs, it'll get very specific and say, aim for 1,133 milligrams of potassium per meal. The dietary guidelines, on the other hand, may focus more on incorporating dark green vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and dairy products into your diet to get the amount of potassium that you would need to meet the DRIs. So this past December, the new dietary guidelines was released, and they're released every 5 years. And this is a continuation of what was stated in the 2015-2020 version, where they say nutrients of foods should, they're not consumed in isolation. So we really need to think about combinations of foods and beverages and think of food patterns, because everything works together for our health. The other continuance is limiting foods and beverages that are higher in added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium. And also to continue preparing foods in healthful ways, baked and broiled and grilled rather than deep fat fried, using healthy fats in cooking preparation, and then rather than salt, looking at using herbs and spices for flavoring our foods. So now I'm going to get into the specific menu requirements. So we are going to have 2 different ways that menus can meet the guidelines. The first method is the nutrient analysis method, which is the method we are currently using, where computer analysis is used to show that the menu is meeting the 1/3 DRI. And also, it's going to be using software analysis, and a dietitian will be approving and signing these menus. Now, this type of method really works for all different meal types, daily prepared hot and cold meals, for example, or frozen meals or shelf-stable meals. The other method is the meal pattern method. And this is usually used when there's no access to nutrient analysis software, but it also can be used for other reasons, for making menu substitutions a little bit easier. Because with the nutrient analysis method, of course, if you have to make a substitution, you have to make sure that the menu is still meeting the exact 1/3 DRI in the nutrient analysis. And a meal pattern method probably works best for daily prepared hot, cold meals or frozen meals over the shelf stable. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So let's test your knowledge, see if you've been paying attention. Which of the following statements is false? A, Title 3C meals must comply with the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans and the 1/3 DRIs. B, the most recent dietary guidelines for Americans are for 2020-2025. C, to show compliance with nutrient requirements, menus must follow a meal pattern and have computer nutritional analysis reports run. And the last one, D, the meals you prepare and provide for older adults are greatly valued and helps to support healthy aging in place. If you pick C, you're correct. That is a false statement. You can use either a meal pattern or a computer nutritional analysis method. You do not have to do both. So first, I'm going to go over the nutritional analysis method for menu compliance. So here is the updated nutrient chart. It's a little bit different from the current one. If you look to the left, of course, the left column, you'll see the nutrients of focus, and then the middle column there is the daily target values, and then the column on the right are the compliance values averaged over a week. So for calories, for example, each day the meal should be greater than or equal to 600 calories, but averaged over a week, it should be between 625 and 850 calories. So we did increase the calorie range just a little bit there. Some other changes that you may notice is that now all the values are averaged over a week. We used to have that vitamin C had to have a minimum daily requirement of 30 milligrams, but now the average 30 milligrams for the week is what is required. So you can have some days below 30 milligrams, and you'll have some that are above, of course, but the main important thing is that over a week-long period, 30 milligrams is reached. Another thing that you'll see is that the potassium amount has decreased. It used to be 1565 milligrams, and now it's 1113. And that is a reflection of something that actually occurred in 2019. And basically, the change occurred when researchers looked at where that 1565 originally came from, and what kind of researchers used to look at that number. And it was realized that most of those studies that looked at increased potassium intake related to like decreased blood pressure and things like that was really related to potassium supplement intake rather than potassium from foods. So the focus has now become of looking at more like adequate intakes for potassium. So what amount of potassium is generally consumed in healthy adults. And so that number has come down to reflect potassium from food. The other thing that you'll notice is carb percent total of calories. We did not have that before, but we do have, of course, diabetes is a chronic condition affecting many people, especially older adults. And there's a lot of I guess, great interest in, knowing what's in our food and how they can manage their blood sugars. Also, zinc and magnesium are not on this chart. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans now has focuses on different age groups, and for the older age group, those are not considered nutrients of underconsumption. So we are focusing on these other ones. And here's our sample menu template. So if the nutrient analysis method is used, it will supersede the meal pattern, meaning that you do not have to serve so many servings of fruits or vegetables or milk. It's more of an analysis of what's in the food. But if using the nutrient analysis method, you must include the breakdown of the daily nutrients and the weekly average values. So if you see in the picture on the left there, below each day's meal, you'll be putting in the nutrient analysis values and then averaging that information all the way over to the left. And this is a very important process of when menus should be submitted for each cycle. Because of course, as you can imagine, there are a lot of menus coming in and lots of nutrient analysis reports. And therefore, to make sure everything is lining up and matching the guidelines, we need that information transferred over to the menu so we can see it all together. Also, you'll notice on this menu below, there's also a line there to include the grams of carbohydrate. Again, just because we have a population who is trying to control their diabetes or prevent diabetes and are becoming, a lot more savvy about wanting to know what's in their food. And last but not least, the menu must be signed by a registered dietitian. Another change that will occur is this checklist, and this is the checklist used for computer analysis. So this must be turned in with each cycle menu, and basically the dietitian will go through each of these items line by line and basically verify that these nutrient target values and compliance values are being met for each week of the cycle. And this is also a very important process. As you can imagine, 1/3 DRI statement could be a very vague one sometimes because it depends on what state and what nutrients are of focus. And so this is just to really ensure that the South Carolina nutrients are being adhered to when the menus are being created. At the bottom of this form, which you can't see on the screen, there's actually a signature line for the dietitian as well. So test your knowledge. For the nutrient analysis method, the following is true. The menu template must include the nutrients in both daily amounts and a weekly average. The nutrient values noted must match the information from nutrient analysis software records. The menu must be signed by a registered dietitian. The menu cycle must also include the South Carolina menu checklist computer analysis signed by the registered dietitian. And E, all of the above. And if you said E, all of the above, you are correct. All of those items are required. So next I'm going to go into the meal pattern method. This one's a little bit longer to go through because of all the different food categories and food subgroups to go through. So this little table here on the left was actually copied and pasted right out of the meal bid specifications. So you do not have to write all this information down, and it looks exactly how it would in the document. But basically, menus are planned around providing foods from each food group or subgroup on a daily or weekly basis. The dietitian would review the recipes and make sure the servings are correct and that the foods are being prepared in healthful ways. And this will work best for daily prepared hot, cold meals or frozen meals. And I did write a little note there for frozen meal systems would not have to meet the 3 servings per week for fresh fruit and vegetable requirement. And I'll get down to that, what that means. But as you can see for the food group or subgroup column, I've got the different food groups in color coded here so you can see them better. So vegetables, there are 5 different subgroups under there. So you'll see dark green vegetables, red and orange vegetables, beans, peas, lentils, starchy vegetables, and other vegetables. So the idea for the meal pattern is that for the vegetables, you're going to serve 2 per meal. And over the week, 1 serving of those vegetables should come from the dark green vegetable category, 1 from the red orange, so on and so forth. And then in the far right column, you will see any kind of recommendations or little notes just to kind of give you some other flexibilities there. You can actually substitute a fruit serving for a vegetable serving, for example. But if you do that, you still have to keep in mind that all of these subgroups should be served at least once per week. Let me see here. Another one that's a little bit different is your vitamin A and vitamin C sources. There should be 3 servings per week from a good vitamin A or vitamin C source. And when we get to the next slides, you'll see a little bit more information about how those are identified. But a good thing to note is that a single fruit or vegetable may count as both a source of vitamin A and vitamin C for the week. So you don't have to count, you can count them as both. Fresh fruits and vegetables, 3 servings per week. And these can be fresh vegetables that are then cooked, that's fine. Or you're talking about like fresh fruit, like a banana or orange, things like that will count. Or it could be fresh vegetables, like as in a salad. But again, if you have a frozen meal system where everything is frozen in the box, and that would be a little bit tricky to try and meet that guideline. So that is where you could deviate from that requirement. Desserts and beverages are optional items on menus, but whenever dessert is served, the majority of the time they should really come from existing food groups like the fruit group, grain group, or dairy group, for example. But of course, every so often having a sweet, like a little cake or something like that is fine and is allowable. Beverages, we really want to encourage older adults to make sure they're drinking enough fluids because dehydration can be a problem. But we want to try and stay away from sugary beverages. So on here, focus really is for water, tea, or coffee. And it really depends also on how the contracts are written, because some of them are not going to want those type of items. And so therefore you might just be using milk as your dairy, but also could be the beverage that's already included. So I won't go through the nitty gritty of all the different food groups, but I just want to give you an idea of what it looks like in the meal specifications. So when you go through each food group, it'll give you the serving sizes of the food group. And then for the vegetables, for example, it's separated into the different subgroups so that you can actually see what vegetables are considered in the dark green category, the red and orange, the beans, peas, and lentils, the starchy vegetables, or the other. And at the bottom, you'll see a little key there where vitamin A sources are that little green diamond, and vitamin C sources are like a little orange colored diamond. So some items on there, like romaine lettuce, you'll see it's got a green and an orange diamond, so that counts as both. So if you have that on the menu, you've already taken off one of your vitamin A and vitamin C requirements for the week. So you just have two left. For some other things you may notice is, like, for example, broccoli cooked. The green diamond for vitamin A is next to the cooked version of broccoli. So basically saying that the cooked version of broccoli is where it's a better source of vitamin A. Again, here's another example of what the fruit group information is going to look like in the meal specifications. Again, it'll give you the different ways that fruit can be provided: fresh, frozen, canned, pureed, or dried. Definitely specifying that if you're doing canned fruit, it should be in water or 100% juice rather than light or heavy syrup. Other things to note is that also there are vitamin A and vitamin C sources coming from fruit. So those are also given a little key next to them, so a little symbol next to them, so that you can identify which ones. For the grain group, I have it divided here into two subgroups. You got your whole grains and your refined grains, and making sure that half should come from whole. And there's just some examples here of what is considered in the whole grain group versus the refined grains, as well as the serving sizes. The dairy and alternates group is also included, and besides milk, we've listed some other things there just to give you some examples. Hard cheese, for example, ricotta, pudding. For the protein group, it's also broken down into subgroups: meat, poultry, eggs, seafood, nuts, seeds, and soy products. And then also some examples of ounce equivalents for protein. And again, protein should be 2 to 3 ounces per meal, and this is the edible portion. So after it's been cooked, not, of course, counting the bones or anything like that that's in there. This is the edible portion. There's also something else to note there, that dry beans and peas are also part of the vegetable group. So if you're using them as a protein here, you can't count them as both. Processed meats, of course, are high in sodium and saturated fat. So we really want to limit those to 1 time a week. So on that little chart in the beginning, you will see that there is some information on how to make sure that that is only limited to 1 time a week. So of course, for the menu template for this method, you are not going to need to complete any nutritional analysis information along the bottom of that template, but the menu will still need to be signed by a registered dietitian. And there's also a checklist with this method as well that the dietitian would complete and make sure has been signed to show that they agree that the menu meets these different requirements. And this would have to be turned in again with each new menu cycle. And it goes week by week or however long your cycle is, so that you can make sure all the categories are met. So another test your knowledge. For the meal pattern method, the following is true. The menu must follow the pattern for food groups, subgroups as provided by the South Carolina Department on Aging. B, for frozen meal systems, you do not need to follow the 3 fresh per week rule for vegetables and fruits. C, the menus must be signed by a registered dietitian. D, the menu cycle must also include the South Carolina menu checklist meal patterns signed by the registered dietitian. And E, all of the above. So if you selected E, that is correct. So here are just a couple of resources for you. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2020-2025 PDF can be found right here. And then also USDA Food Database for looking up individual foods to see their actual nutrient content. If you wanted to look at any comparisons, especially for like raw versus cooked or whatnot, that is also a helpful guide. So with that, I want to see if anybody has any questions. It's a little bit different than what you've been doing, the nutrient analysis template, but not a lot different. The meal pattern is probably the most different thing you'll see. You can either throw a question into the chat box, or let me see if I can unmute people here. Okay, I'm calling my backup, Renee. You might have to help me unmute.
People should be able to unmute themselves now, Rowan.
Okay, maybe they just want to stay quiet. Okay, I see. Okay, I got some questions in the chat box. Will there be a link sent out to view this? I am doing a recording, so yes, once we get it ready, I will send that out so people can watch the recording. I think also what would be helpful is for you to actually read through the meal specifications, the guidelines in there. That way you can really sit down and look at it all together. Let's see, I have another question. Thank you for the presentation. You're welcome. And the question was, can you confirm the potassium requirement? On the slide it states 1113 milligrams. In the table it has 11. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me make sure. It should be 1133. I apologize. The table is correct. Any other questions? Like I said, if you have specific questions that are, related to your unique operation and how to incorporate these guidelines into your menus and your meals, I'm more than happy to meet with you, probably virtually, to discuss further. Again, my email is rgoodrich@aging.sc.gov. Okay, well, thank you. I don't see any more comments coming through in the chat box. And I thank you all for your time today. And I hope you find these new guidelines give you a little bit more flexibility in the meal planning process. Thank you so much.